And welcome to the Oddity Archive, the show that just sometimes needs a good hard reset. Anyway, a few months ago, I did an episode on early mobile devices, and the main attraction of that episode was the Apple Newton. And today I've got something of an unintentional sequel to that one. So, over the summer, my parents were cleaning out their house, and my mom found her old Palm 3E PDA, and I didn't even know she'd ever owned one. But despite it not having the docking station or any of the accessories anymore, she nonetheless offered it to me, and of course I said yes, and I stuck it in the Ben's junk pile. But more recently, just in trolling the thrift stores, I found this, at the time, new old stock Palm 5 PDA for half off, no less. But as you'll see, some things went pretty badly wrong with it. So I was left with something of an incomplete episode. So I've gone back and I've filled in the would-be remaining time with a segment on a totally unrelated and much more modern piece of technology. And that would be these very cheap so-called spy glasses, which are just the walking, talking definition of discreet. I think I'd be less suspicious going out in public dressed as a pineapple. But anyway, let's get started. I've mentioned before that my father had one of these things, not necessarily this model, by way of an employer back in the late 90s, early 2000s, and he just hated it and proceeded to continue using a good old pen and paper for everything. And I personally remember being really unenthused by the Palm Pilot, and I'm just going to use that name generically. I was unenthused because pretty much the only, in my mind, productive things you could do with it required hooking it up to the computer anyway, so it seemed a little silly to me, even back then. But before I get to the demo, or as much of one as I can give minus the docking station, let me just give a real quick little history lesson while you stare blankly at the Palm 3. So, the original Palm Pilots debuted in 1996, and they could top out, with the help of an aftermarket kit at least, at 1 megabyte of hard drive RAM, and could handle some basic aftermarket applications like games, and the higher end units could also do flash memory. Now, of course, over time, Palm Pilots developed, of course, greater memory, the ability to go online, real audio and video capability, and it all culminated in actually some of the first real honest to God smartphones, Palm smartphones. And in 2011, the Palm brand, which had sold out to Hewlett Packard, was discontinued. Now, I hear that as of my making this episode, there's been another change of hands in terms of the rights, and there's some sort of crowdfunding thing going on in an attempt to revive the Palm name for a new line of smartphones. Now, this is all from Wikipedia, so take that with a major grain of salt. But anyway, let's take a cut and we'll do as much of a demo as I can. As for this baby, I think this will be a decent look at a mid-period, middle-of-the-road Palm PDA. I just hope my camcorder plays nice with this. But anyway, before we get started with the actual running of this, I just wanted to show some of the more nuts and bolts sort of things. So, this runs on AAA batteries, which I actually really like because, as I learned with the Newton, rechargeable proprietary battery packs just don't stand the test of time too well. And seriously, if you really want rechargeables, you can buy rechargeable AAAs, AA's, or whatever. So I can't say I've ever entirely understood that one. And of course, we've got the Velcro here, which was aftermarket for this little case. But under the corner here is this little hole. And that's where you do the hard reset for this if something goes really horribly wrong. Unfortunately, the stylus is too fat, so you'll need a needle or something to stick down in there. And then we got the contrast wheel, which I'm not going to mess with because I've got this about as well dialed in as I can. Down here we got the place to hook up to the docking station or an aftermarket keyboard, and yeah. And we've also got in the center here an IR sensor, bringing us back around to Newton territory, so you can communicate with, in this case, other Palm devices. But anyway, I'm probably gonna piss off a few of the tech geeks, particularly overtly nostalgic ones, by saying this. So what else is new? But I feel like this is something of an exercise in redundancy, these Palm devices, at least the 90s and early 2000s ones. And really, if it's not a redundant app, it's redundant in terms of access. So let's get into that. So let me turn this thing on by, well, I guess I need to hit that oh so 90s button first. And there we are. And I can get a backlight on this if I hold down the power button, but it just doesn't play nice with the camcorder, so I'll turn it back off. So, on the topic of redundancy, the big one to me is you've got the memo pad here, which is great, and you can just write stuff. But you've also got the expenses app, which is just it's not a ledger or anything. It doesn't work with the calculator. You're just punching in dollar amounts and whatever that type of expense is. If I can actually get it to stick with me. There we go. So to me, it's kind of like, couldn't you just stick with the memo pad if it's not going to help with accounting? I try and get it so all the apps are on the screen. But anyway, another point of redundancy is access. So the big one, you got the address book right here, and hey, it actually has some stuff in it. But you can just as easily access it by hitting that corresponding button. And you can also do that with the calculator and the appointment book. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But anyway, moving on, my personal favorite thing about this is probably the thing that dates it the most. You can sync this device with your computer, and you can do that to later read emails. I've just got a basic, generic startup email here. Try and scroll through it a little. If I can hit it just right. But it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And I mean, if you're that hard up, maybe you should have a laptop with some sort of access, online access. If you're on the plane or something, if you're that important, really, why would you want to write it out ahead of time? Couldn't you have, if you're that high up on the totem pole, wouldn't you just have a real flesh and blood assistant? So, yeah. That's just me. And then to bring this back around again to Newton territory, when writing, it has handwriting recognition, so let's open up the memo pad and start something new. You have to learn this new language called graffiti, which, if you were paying attention during that first box segment, you've already kind of seen that. But it's just this kind of odd hybrid of upper and lower case, and sometimes just nonsense. So the letter T is actually written by just writing a right angle. Right angle. And E is this kind of hung up between upper and lower case, so you kind of have to do that for an E. An A is an incomplete A. But of course this is all kind of pointless because you can just hit down here where you've got ABC and get yourself a little keyboard. And as I mentioned, there's a real full-size aftermarket keyboard that you could get for this, and this would just be kind of pointless. But, yeah. There you go. Now let's go and take a look at that brand new Palm 5, shall we? All right, let's open up our Palm 5 connected organizer. And as is always the great danger with these unboxings, I only have one shot at it, so things could go terribly wrong, but let's hope not. All right, let's do this. I guess I don't even really need a knife. I can just kind of pull it apart. Well, that was easy. Looks like it just pops right open. Yeah, hey, how about that? All right, we got us a nice sticker here. Let's see, this is a 2 megabyte model, Palm 5. Don't see a date on it, though. We've got our Read Me First book. And we've got cheat sheets. Well, I mean, if you've been staring at my box for this episode, which is a total lie because I'm actually filming this ahead of the box segment, a little company secret. Whatever. Accessory catalog. Well, I'm sure that was a little more useful 15 years ago. Pretty thick, though. Or it's actually just two things. Yeah, it is. Handbook. Okay, we've got a serial cable and a docking station. And what would this be? I don't know my old school connections very well. Serial to SCSI, if memory serves. I haven't dealt with this stuff in years. So hopefully this is our AC adapter that's going to save the episode. Sure is. Now, I'm sure I'll still have to run it through the docking station, I'd imagine. And here is this it? Yeah. There it is. Looks a lot like the other one. It's a good bit thinner though, but then again, I haven't attached. I'm sure there's something to be attached. Well, I do have a case to cover it up with. But that appears to be it. So let me clean this up. Let me see if I can't get our brand new Palm 5 going, and we'll see what we can do, and maybe we can make it even talk to the old one. So this is something of a colossal failure. It's now over 4 hours since I opened the box. It wouldn't do anything at all unless I had it in the charger, in the dock. And I finally got it going, see if I can get it back up. But what I found was it went to its usual startup screen and all, and it had me calibrate the screen, and I thought I did a good job, but something seems to have gone wrong because I have the appointment book open here. 4 o'clock is highlighted, but how do I get to 5 o'clock? That's how horribly far out of whack it is, and it just seems to get a little wackier the farther you go along. So I was gonna try and beam something, anything to the old Palm device, but I just can't get it to play nice long enough to actually do anything of value. And it also seems to vary a bit from screen to screen, from app to app. It's just a kind of a nightmare. So I don't know how this was stored or whatever, but something seems to have gone goofy with it, unfortunately, over the years. But I guess that's bound to happen with some of this old technology. Can't say I didn't try. The Palm 5's failure notwithstanding, I feel like I could really just about cut and paste my review of the Apple Newton and apply it to the Palm line of PDAs. And I would just add to it that it was the logical next step on that inevitable march towards smartphones and tablets, and you've got it. But as I saw it at the time, and as I mentioned, watching my dad play around with the one that he had, in all reality, it just felt like a glorified pad of post it notes. And playing with one or two on my own now, I can't say my feelings are all that different. And I can just hear the vitriol from some of my viewers now. But anyway, majorly switching gears here. Let's get down to those spy glasses that I teased earlier. And let me explain this a bit. I just got these cheapies about a month ago, and they were $13. And the idea was that sometimes when I'm making archive, sometimes I just need that really tight camera shot, and the tripod just doesn't cut it. And to make matters worse, I'm usually trying to perform some task with the other hand. So, camcorder in one hand and like a screwdriver in the other, and it's always a train wreck. So I figured, well, maybe a Ben cam would be in order, something first person. And so I went and picked these up just as a proof of concept, and I'm not entirely sure what I was thinking because it just doesn't really work. But yeah, at least it made for some nice unintentional humor. And let's take a closer look. As I mentioned, I was looking for a hands-free first-person perspective camera solution for occasional archive use. And so here we are. And these are, well, it's the box for some cheap, generic, Chinese-made glasses. And there's some wonderful pictures on here, all of people who are clearly not wearing the product. Now, as for the, if you will, specs, I found that pretty much everything on here is one big lie. The biggie being 30 frames per second. Frames per second. This thing drops frames like crazy. And this thing likes to, a lot of times, do its own editing on the fly. So you'll have these strange little jumps from one thing to another when you watch your footage back. Now, I also, these were supposed to be 1080p, and, well, neither box is checked, and I guess that's right, because the best I've gotten out of these is only 480p. But anyway, as for the contents of that box, we've got just a standard micro USB to USB cable. And then we've got this incredibly cheap glass case. And in that case are, well, you got a very oddly stiff and scratchy lens cloth, and one that I was actually dumb enough to use. And of course, the glasses themselves, if I can get them out, which are very chunky and costumey, and I just don't think they'd fool a 3-year-old. And this runs on micro SD cards, which are damn near impossible to get in and out. See if I can at least get mine out partially, just so you can see it. And, oh, it's trying to blink on me. Let's get that back in there. Obviously, I've done something to upset it. But anyway, to record, it's an issue of hitting this one button, the one and only button on here, and basically just hoping you get the right combination of lights that'll do what you need. So I think it's supposed to be 3 flashes of red for recording, and then 2 flashes of red and 1 of blue for end recording, and then just blue for power off. But there doesn't seem to be any consistent logic. So presumably it's recording something right now. But it just kind of does whatever it wants, I've noticed. And a lot of my footage has been kind of the luck of the draw. And it's not really much of any luck. But anyway, last item from the box. Got the instructions. And I'm going to do a little read-along with Benny Boy here. So I just gotta read this, because this is some of the most impenetrable English of all time. Let me see if I can't force my camera to focus on this. And I'll do my best to maintain the punctuation. In standby state, long time press the video button for about 2 seconds. The red light is flashing 3 times, then off. It starts to do video. In recording, short time press the video button, blue light flashing 3 times continuously, and then off, which means stop recording. Meanwhile, a file in AVI format is saved. For guarantee, the size and safety of the taken videos, the system saves the videos once every 10 minutes, automatically, and take the video continuously. And I think you can see why I struggled with this a bit. And also there's something kind of amusing under reset, where it talks about doing a hard reset, and I guess you're supposed to use a slim pole for that. Kinky. Anyway, with all that out of the way, let's get down to some footage that I shot on these suckers. And given that I don't really have any projects that I'm working on at the moment that require any particularly deep shots, I opted to, in the spirit of the lazy game reviewer, take these with me on a couple of thrift store jaunts, which occurred on different days. But I found, starting with my very first testing of these things at home, there's always a date stamp on your footage, and it is permanently May 5th, 2015. Of which the only way you can adjust or remove the timestamp is by some odd, incomprehensible software hack that's discussed in here. Yeah, not happening. Anyway, here's some of that footage that I shot. I guess I should be thankful that I took that thrift store footage early in the morning. I think it was like 9 o'clock in the morning. Because I already had to endure, as you'd kind of expect, some weird looks and some awkward moments, and I can only imagine the sheer tonnage that I would have endured any later. But anyway, that's it for today's archive. Join me next time when I get my techie credentials revoked. Again. But come to think of it, I always seem to get them back. But it just kind of does whatever it wants.